Hey, how's it going, y'all? This is Joe Stizzy here. You may have heard me on a little podcast called Internet's Worst Gaming Podcast with my co host Loki Jarson, in which I talked about this game, Resident Evil Veronica, but I did not go in depth. Where we went a little in depth. I gave my thoughts on it, but I wanted to go a little bit more into it and sort of break down the trailer, what we see in it, what I hope to see in the final game, because Code Veronica, I think I mentioned in that show, is one of my favorite games of all time, and it has a special place in my heart. But I also know it is a very flawed game, and there's plenty of room for improvement. And if done right, this game could be one of the most memorable, not just remakes, but survival horror games we've had in recent history. So, fingers crossed, but let's just dive in and see what's in here. And now, first shot is obviously some European city. And I'm no expert, but when I first saw this, I instantly thought Paris. And when I thought that, I thought, wait a minute, Code Veronica starts in Paris? Maybe. But at first, I was still coping at that point, so I didn't quite believe it. But the eagle-eyed who first saw this noticed this building in the background, which I also noticed, but what I didn't see, but some did, is right at the top here, you can see the umbrella symbol there. Just instantly telling you, yep, this is a Resident Evil game, and there's a good chance that it's Code Veronica. And here we see Café de Parapluie, however you say that. I'm not French, sorry. But it translates to roughly Umbrella's Cafe. And you can see the color scheme of the awning. Red and white also matches the umbrella symbol. And you see this car pulling up here. And people were also looking into it because when these trailers come out, everybody's going over them with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find any sort of reference or Easter egg. And people are speculating about the license plate number. And these first four digits are very familiar for Code Veronica because there's a code to one of the puzzles that is 1126. So that's definitely a reference to that, I'm sure. But SP75, I'm not sure what that is, what that could be referencing. So, and we see somebody holding a map with a piece of paper, obviously directions, trying to find their way to locate. And it's in first person. But there's just something you can tell about this trailer that just gives off the RE Engine vibe. And you see, obviously, right outside an apartment, and you see whoever this person is, finger, looks like a lady's fingers. Just you can tell from the hand shape, texture of the skin, the fingernails, little polish, buzzing for the concierge. And open up, and it is... Oh, that's right, she does it a few times. I'll skip around here. I'm not used to this, like I mentioned. I've never done one of these before, but I don't want to get in trouble. So I'll just skip around. And this old lady opens up. She's a concierge. And basically saying, oh, you're the sister of the man who lives upstairs. And that was another clue in my head. And I thought to myself at this point, there's no way this is happening, right? There's no way there could be a Code Veronica remake. And she seems very friendly, although there are people online already speculating that she might be a little bit more sinister than what meets the eye. But we'll get into that more later. She takes whoever this person is upstairs. Still can't tell who it is even from this shot. You can see the shadow, but not any other features. Leads into the whoever this person is to the apartment. And right off the bat, it's a mess. There is crap scattered all hither and around. Somebody's doing some investigating work, recon, got photos, got a camera here, radio, recorder. So obviously someone doing some recon and also getting some big gains in while they're at it. I think somebody online said this, they approximated this was about 47 kilograms, I think, which would equate to 75 pounds. I'm probably getting that wrong, but other people noted this plant here on the windowsill over the kitchen, saying that it resembled green herbs that are a staple of the Resident Evil franchise. So, like they're a little fuller than usual, but yeah, it's it's probably the case there, I imagine. And this poor lady, she's distraught by the state of the room. And she throws a line in here that I did not catch in my first viewing, but she says it looks like a boulder ran through here. Also a reference to Resident Evil 5 and Chris Redfield punching a boulder out of the way. So, nice little nod there. I appreciate that. Grab some of the candy there. Say, oh, I'm sure he won't mind if we have a little bit of this. Stealing her tenant's candy. That's fine. I'm sure that happens all the time. And she says, I'll get us some tea while you enjoy these. And oh, yeah. Well, somebody, the phone starts ringing. Yeah, that's what drives her away initially. And leaves this person into the apartment by themselves. And you can kind of see, you can see the red sleeve of what it definitely is a jacket. So this is for sure Claire Redfield. And she probably has no compunction about eating her brother's snacks, I'm sure. Siblings share and share alike, right? And she's reaching for this card. And obviously it was burnt in this ashtray. Now, it's really hard to tell. In fact, you can't really tell anything on it, so who knows what's on there. Something Chris obviously didn't want anybody to see. Some important information, maybe where he's headed to next, maybe a number for Jill or Barry, because they're also supposed to be with him, trying to take Umbrella down, but comes a knock at the door. Person moves towards it, looks through the peephole, sees nothing, opens the door, and then grabbed. Ooh. And captured. And you can kind of see her eye there, but it's really hard to tell. But another giveaway was this. Skip past it. It's really hard to. This red lens here on this helmet here looks very similar to another character, Resident Evil Hunk, and he's been very, very prominent in this remake, in these more recent Resident Evil titles. In fact, it's highly regarded that he was the commander in Requiem that Leon fights and supposedly kills. But when you go back, his body's not there. So he is the Grim Reaper. So it's not surprising he'd be very hard to kill. But here we go. First shot of our first environment here. And it's a very heavily wooded area here. Sort of a path going through here. And you got the power lines. So this is obviously somewhere on the island, but I replayed Code Veronica this past week, and I don't recall ever seeing anything quite like this in the game. There is one covered walkway that you take to the manor that has some trees, I think, in one shot as you're going up to the manor, but as far as going in and out of tree lines and forested areas, not really the case in Code Veronica, so that may change in this one. And that would definitely make the atmosphere a bit more tense and oppressive, because you're not sure what's going to come, what monster going to come from where. And here we got some huge industrialized fans, some sort of construction area. Can't really tell if this is at Rockford or maybe at the Antarctic base. They're both in pretty bad states by the time the game comes around, so this could be either or. I think I remember one area that sort of resembled this in Code Veronica during Chris's sections. There's a couple sections he gets that are unique to him, but there's not many. And one of them kind of looks like that, and they reveal the V. And I think this is just a little bit of tongue-in-cheek by Capcom, because there's been a lot of discussion online in recent years, ever since the remake started rolling out, that they may not remake RE5 just given the settings and the demographics of the enemies that you fight in that game. And I think that's just ridiculous. Nobody ever got offended for, all the other different kind of people that you kill in previous Resident Evil games. Nobody was getting offended that you're killing Spanish people in Spain in 4. So that shouldn't be a reason not to remake it. But one reason, another that people think, is that this is the 5th remake, technically, after the original 2, 3, 4, and now V. But they're going slightly out of order if that's the case. So There's some sort of terminal. Again, hard to tell where this is. I don't think it's the main terminal that you enter in the final code to set the end game in motion. Another room here with a bunch of tubes just snaking their way across the floor, up through some equipment covered in plastic. So some decommissioned area. Could have been running experiments. Could be some sort of storage facility. Maybe in the dark here there might be a pod with a BOW or something. There's the dragonfly and the ants, so central to the game and to the theme and to the motif of the main antagonist. There's the E, and at this point you definitely tell this is an RE5 game, or RE engine game. Another tarp off area. Let me go back to this, because the lighting is very, very different in this game. There's a lot more red, and that may be for the purposes of the trailer, but I think they also kind of want to make red sort of the main color scheme in this game, because it so closely resembles Claire's red jacket. That's her primary color that a lot of her outfits are based off of. And the lighting in the original game is kind of all over the place. It's sort of muted in some areas and really bright in other areas. There's also this sort of weird fog permeating around most of the maps, and I don't know if that was a graphical limitation or if it was a intentional design choice, but I think they'll make this one pretty dark overall, just given what we've seen and what they've said, that they want to focus more on the horror in this game as opposed to 4 Remake or Requiem, which I think is a good choice. You see one of the Rockford Island guards holding his pistol, clearly dead. Don't know if he died trying to fight off some zombies or if he shot himself so he wouldn't have to live with zombies anymore. Don't know. And there's the main entrance of Rockford Island, and it's incredibly imposing, much more so than the original. It's much higher. The gunner's nest here, way at the top. A lot of barbed wire around the area. I noticed this truck too that crashed into the wall here, and it has a bunch of bodies in the back, and they look very much like zombies. But I don't know if they were just transporting prisoners' corpse and they turned into zombies, or if they killed some zombies and then were transporting them. I don't know why you would bother doing that, but I think it might be the case that they were transporting cadavers and then they turned and then caused that truck to go on the fence. So, and there's the R, there's the resident. So it's REV, and people, it's like, okay, this is not RE5, obviously, just given the settings and the landscapes we've seen in this trailer. So it's got to be Code Veronica, but I thought, are they rebranding it? And here we see helicopters going to Rockford Island, probably after Claire gets captured and they're transferring her over to the prison. Or it might be HCF, which was the organization that Wesker belonged to, and they attacked the island to capture the T. Veronica virus. So it might be them too, but these probably, just 2 of them probably transport helicopters. And then here we see the golden guns, and if you hadn't guessed it by now, this seals the deal here. These are the golden Lugers that are primarily one of the characters, Steve's, main weapons. And they're also the solution to a puzzle too, but they look incredible. The engravings are phenomenal. Big Boss wouldn't like them, but they look good. And speaking of Steve, that is our first shot here, and it's very hard to tell. Because very quickly, I can't get it, but you can tell right when that shot happens, the first frame, you see a character with red hair. This character has red hair, pretty much confirming that it is Steve, and he's pulling up some sort of hood, and he's walking away. Now, Steve is an incredibly divisive character among the fan base. He is abrasive, overconfident, whiny, and just generally very annoying. And I don't think his VA did a good job, to be honest. Didn't do his character any favors, Because Steve has an interesting and tragic backstory. He's probably more fleshed out than most Resident Evil characters are, to be quite honest with you. And I think if given another shot, he could easily become a fan favorite. I think with a little bit more work. But I hope they don't take I hope they don't take some of those other character traits away. I hope he still is overconfident and kind of a loner, and also trying to constantly impress Claire throughout the game as he goes on, because he's 17 years old. He's basically a kid, so a lot of his antics and his personality are understandable. But once you learn more about his story and the circumstances that brought him to the island, he becomes more sympathetic, I think, and I think he could. I think he can grow on a lot of fans. So I'm glad he's getting another chance to sort of redeem the character. Because I've always been a Steve apologist. I've always looked past all the shortcomings and see that he has potential to be a really good character. And here we see the foyer, or the entry hall to the training facility. And it's much more grandiose than the original. Staircases. There's two of them now, not just the one staircase, but it's looking up to what's looking like a much more expanded second floor. And I like the lighting too. It looks like a much grander looking hall. A lot more details on the doors and all the furnishings, the banisters and architecture and whatnot. Looks very, very cool. And here we see a shot of one of the antagonists of the game, Alfred Ashford. And now Alfred is also a very controversial character, because he is an absolute grade A whack job in the story. And he is constantly, throughout the first half of the game, pestering Claire and trying to entrap her and throwing obstacles at her and throwing monsters at her and just being a general menace. And he's very, I don't know what the right word is. He's not flamboyant, but he's a nobleman, but he's just a mad nobleman. And he is obsessed with bringing glory to the Ashford family. But you can tell he's on the lower rung of Umbrella on the hierarchy. So he's been shunted to this island and been there for decades, trying to bring back any sort of prestige back to the family name, and failing miserably, I might add. But Alfred's another one that's fascinating, because you pick up little bits here and there throughout the game about his inferiority complex to his sister, how she was always overshadowing him, how he was forgotten, just kind of set aside by his father, and Umbrella as well, the company, just sticking him here in the island just to get him out of the way. Not that I'm saying he's sympathetic or anything like that, because, like I said, he's a psychopath. He's a monster. He tortures inmates, employees, experiments on them. But the thing that's most controversial, I'd say, among fandom and modern audiences is the fact that he is cross-dressing, and he is dressing up as his sister, who is his twin. And there's a scene in the game where you see him taking he takes the dress and takes the wig off, but he's still got makeup on, and he becomes horrified when he sees that, and he runs out, and you're thinking, wow, this guy is one of the biggest freaks. So I hope they don't take that out, because that's a major core of his character, and it really reflects on the weight of his isolation and how lonely and how obsessed he is with his sister, and it's how it's basically driven him to madness. So they have said that they're going to be retuning things regarding the story elements, and I'm afraid that's probably going to be one of them, along with one of Claire's more infamous lines when she's referring to Alfred as "you cross-dressing freak." That'll be axed. There's no way that's coming in. Very unfortunate, but just the way it is. Here we see another overhead aerial shot of the island, and we could pick up some landmarks here. There's the manor in the background. That's easy to spot for sure. Some sort of tower or apparatus, maybe a communications tower, something like that. This looks like it might be the training facility, and part of maybe a dock or something like that. And then there's a lot of wooded area too. And I'm wondering if you'll be able to explore this more, as we saw in one of the first shots there with the forested path. So that would be really cool and really open up the island. Give it a lot more life to it. And now you see our first shot at Claire Redfield. She looks incredible. Absolutely phenomenal. I liked her Resident Evil 2 remake look. I like this one even more. I think they did a much better job of capturing the model's likeness in this game and really fine-tuning it. And she looks great. And there was another shot that they've shown after this trailer released of a render of her outfit, and she's got red jacket. She's got the jeans on. Looks very, very reminiscent of her original outfit. No high top jeans, unfortunately. And it's a jacket instead of a vest, unlike the original. But the only thing I would say is, and we could see a little bit more, and she said, "We found you, Claire Redfield," something like that. And now you see the title drop, Veronica. And there's Claire's symbol on her jacket. Resident Evil Veronica. That is the name of this remake. And somebody asked at a Q&A with one of the Resident Evil producers, I think his name is Yoshiaki Hirabayashi, I believe. I'm probably butchering that. Apologize. Should have looked that up, refreshed myself on that. But somebody asked why they dropped the code out of the title, and the reason they stated was that they wanted this to be more in line with the other titles of the more recent games. For instance, RE7 or Biohazard RE7, Resident Evil Village, and Resident Evil Requiem, sort of have the Resident Evil title and then one subtitle. I don't see how just adding Code Veronica would be that much bigger of a deal. It's just one other word, but it's Resident Evil Veronica. I'm sure I'll still call it Code Veronica Remake. That's just what I've been calling it for 26 years, so it'd be hard to drop the habit for sure. But yeah, REV, that's where the V comes in. And yeah, here we see another look at Claire. And, there we go. Okay. Yeah, another look at Claire. And hard to tell in the lighting here, but in the render, her jacket color is a bit on the muted side. I hope they add a little bit more color to it. She's got her choker on, but this actually, instead of her own choker like she has on in the original game, this looks more like a collar that they may put on the prisoners, sort of similar to what Steve has on in the game. And it's never really addressed in the game, but I always assumed it was some sort of tracking device that they put on the prisoners. So that may be what it is, just to have her have it on, kind of like Steve. And this is probably the beginning where she wakes up in the cell, and there's a bottle of hemostatic medicine that Rodrigo needs. She looks down, sees some blood. Is Rodrigo around? She speaks. Oh, is that him? No. Oh, it's zombies. Bunch of zombies. And as you can see, there are a lot. All right, let me get this. Just perfect. Okay, that's not perfect, but it's good enough. Okay, as you can see, there are a lot. And another thing they have stated is that instead of the zombies being pretty much on their own in the other remakes, like in more primarily 2 remake, they're going to be moving in hordes in this game. So there's going to be a bunch of them. And in speaking of RE2 remake, they have also stated that this game is going to play mostly like that. So how I take to mean that is there won't be any dodging or parrying or anything like that you see in 3, 4 remake and Requiem, which I think is a good idea, especially if they are emphasizing the horror and survival horror and try to make it a darker atmospheric game. But if the zombies are going to be moving in hordes, then I presume you're going to need a little bit more firepower to deal with them, unless they're going to stress that they want you to try to avoid them as much as possible. And if there are ways to divert them or split them apart to deal with them more easily, not sure. That could be the case, but I also got to believe that you're going to get some some heavy firepower, and that might mean that might see the return of the dual wield. You can dual wield weapons in the original game, like Uzis, the Lugers that you saw earlier in the shot. And so I wonder if those will be coming back. I don't think they'll do split targeting like they did in the original, but you could have an extra gun or two at your side, and they may rework some of the other weapons, like the bow gun. I would like it if they made it just more powerful than it was, because it's garbage in the original game. The explosive bolts that you get are really good, but the original bolts, the standard ones, are not so good. So I hope they make it a single shot, more powerful weapon. Maybe have it act like Krauser's bow in the RE4 Mercenaries, where it has a little bit more pushback power, maybe piercing power too. Maybe you can pin zombies to the wall. Who knows? And they may rework Claire's grenade too. I also wonder if they're going to split weapons between Claire and Chris, who is the other protagonist of this game. And because in the original, both characters can use any weapons, provided that the other character puts that weapon in the item box, because they also share inventory in the item box, that is. So I wonder if that's going to be reworked as well, and there might be some weapons that only Claire can use and some weapons that only Chris can use. But 2027 is when it's coming out. And I think this is a good idea to just give us a standard year. There are some people saying that there might be a chance that it comes out before March 31st, because that's the end of the fiscal year for Capcom. But I think it's probably a good idea for them at this point in development to not give a specific date, just in case they can't quite meet that and they need a little bit more time. Because I think this game needs a lot of time, attention, and love to it. And I hope it's very, very ambitious, because, like I said earlier, I think this could be one of the better Resident Evil games in recent history. Because, personally, I think they've been a mixed bag. I played Requiem. I like some bits of it. Overall, not that great. I like the remakes for the most part. 2 and 4 were great. 3 was not really good at all. There was way too much cut content. And this game does not need any more content cut. It might need some things reworked. I would like to see some things reworked. But it's mostly the level designs, the environments, the pacing, reworking Chris's section, because a lot of his parts in the game are just retreads of Claire's areas. There's slight deviations in some new areas that he gets, but not really that much. It doesn't make a very memorable experience for Chris. So I hope they change that in this one. I hope they give him his own areas and give him his own time to shine, because if they bring back Wesker, which I'm sure they will, he's one of the antagonists of the game. I hope they bring him back and that we see more of him and his rivalry and relationship with Chris, and really build on that, because that would be great. And another thing I was wondering too is if they're going to have a Wesker boss fight in this game, because in the original game you take on Alexia, who's the main final boss of the game, as Chris. And there's not really much narrative weight to the fight, as opposed to what if Claire had fought Alexia. Like, I think Claire would have a much bigger motivation of taking on Alexia, seeing as how she was partly responsible for Alfred being killed, and Alexia was also responsible for Steve being killed, and Claire goes very close to Steve throughout the game. So I think it would make more sense if Claire actually fought Alexia. There might be a choice between the two of them, whether you can choose to play Chris or Claire. But actually, I think I might prefer if Claire takes down Alexia and then Chris fights Wesker, and have a fight similar to Wesker's fight in Resident Evil 5. I think that would be very, very cool. It's very one-sided, but it's all cinematics. It's just a cutscene in the original game. So yeah, like I said, there's just so much they could rework with this game to make it a masterpiece, and I hope they do. This is being made by the same team as the Resident Evil 2 remake and the Resident Evil 4 remake, which was a relief when I heard that. And because I think though they did a really good job on those games, and they have some experts that have actually worked on the original game too. So you got the best of both worlds there. You got the veteran staff, and you got the experienced staff that's worked with these remakes, and they know what the fans like. They know what works, and I hope they implement all the right things, and they don't change too much about what Code Veronica's identity was, because it's a survival horror game, but there's also a bit of action there, and it's a little cinematic. And it was around the time of when The Matrix was huge, and a lot of video games and movies were imitating it. So you get Matrix Wesker doing wall runs in the game. Although, if I remember, that might have been in Code Veronica X, the re-release. I don't know if that was in the Dreamcast originally, because I don't think the final showdown was in the Dreamcast version between Chris and Wesker. It's been a while since I played that version, so I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, this could be great, and I hope it is great, because this game has always been sort of the black sheep of the Resident Evil titles. It's existed in this weird place between the main numbered titles and sort of the spin-offs. It's not quite up there in the top, but it's not quite there in the lower tiers. But they have said, I think it was the producer that was doing the Q&A at Summer Game Fest, the Hirabayashi, I believe his name was. He did say that they, among the staff and the team, do regard Code Veronica as important as one of the main stories, because it moves the story along. It's very, very integral to the overarching plot of Resident Evil, and it moves the entire franchise out of the shadow of Raccoon City and Spencer's Mansion, and it brings it out to this wider world, and shows what's capable of these outbreaks and these incidents happening in other places. And so if they rework some of the kind of the duller levels, and because there's a lot of industrial corridors and just bland paths around just generic buildings or whatnot, if they rework that, but keep the iconic locations like the training facility, like the manor, like the Antarctic base, and with a remake's combat, yeah, I think this could be a classic, and I hope it is. So I got a lot more thoughts about it, since just given my history with this game, with the original, and my hopes and dream for this one. So I may do something more intensive in the future, but yeah, for now, I'm going to call it for this one. I'll leave it on that one. So thanks for joining me for this. Sorry if it was rough. I know it was rough. This is the first time I've ever done something like this on my channel before. And while we did talk about it on the podcast I do at the Internet's Worst Gaming Podcast, I didn't get to go in depth as I would wanted to with this trailer, and I just wanted to do that here. And I hope to do so more in the future, and hopefully I get better at it. But maybe not. We'll see. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time. Y'all take care.